Yeah, I mean, let's start where we always start with just, the word authenticity. When people tell you that, be your authentic self, or when you hear the word, like what comes to mind for you?
So this is something that honestly I've struggled with for a long time and trying to find my authentic voice and what that means to me. And I think what it boils down to ultimately is trusting in yourself to be able to make the right decisions for you, depending upon, whatever situation you're in. I think that we're all multifaceted, human beings, and that we get to have so many different layers and angles to ourselves that it's really trusting to know, like, in this moment, this is who I am, and that's good and appropriate and should be celebrated.
Yeah. Do you think you've always had that trust in yourself, or
Mm.
even were allowed to have that trust in yourself?
I don't know. I think allow is interesting. I don't know that there's really, the permission is what you give to yourself at the
Mm.
end of the day. And for me, it used to be a concern of, well, what are other people going to think? Because, I have all of these different roles that I play, being in corporate, being, first gen, back when I was in college. And it was this pressure that I had on myself of, all right, well, I need to make sure that I'm the right person for this situation. And I think now I've gotten a lot better at that, to the point where I really don't care what other people think, because I know that I'm making the right decisions for myself.
Yeah, yeah. No, I feel you on that. I meant more so, especially, you mentioned being first gen. When I said aloud, sometimes, like we want to be a certain person, but our family has this idea around like what they want us to be. So allowed in the sense like, yo, I want to say this and that, but my mom told me I shouldn't, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to a degree, but again, I think it's the permission that you give to yourself ultimately. For me, nobody ever told me that I had to do something, like in my family, that I had to be a certain way. It was just this kind of unspoken understanding almost of, all right, we're here, like, be great. But, when it came to school or career or, big decisions, there wasn't for me that a pressure explicitly from my family, but for some reason it was something that I internalized just from society as a whole.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it was the same for me too. Like my mom never told me you have to be a certain thing, or I mean, she didn't even have like certain expectations for grades either. Like she never told me, I mean, obviously like she wanted me to do well in school, but I think a lot of the pressure like I put on myself instead of like my family necessarily like telling me to be a certain thing. Like you always hear like certain stories around family members telling their kids like you have to be a doctor or you have to be like this and that or a lawyer. And like my mom never told me that either. So it's interesting like that we sometimes feel the pressure to put that pressure on ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like why do you think you put that much pressure on yourself?
um I'm not sure. I think it's just ultimately society and media, and what we're consuming every day, and what this idea of the quote unquote American dream is or is supposed to be. And it's like, all right, well, my parents came here, and now it's my job to like fulfill on all of the hard work that they put in. And same thing, my mother never, demanded, good grades or anything from me. There was this expectation that I'd be a good student, but it was just kind of like, do what you gotta do. Like, I'm working 12 hours at the salon, and I just need you to pull through, kind of thing. So I think it just comes from society and media, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hell of a representation too. Like our family works so hard. So how we look like not working either just as hard or harder. You know what I mean? Like it's funny because I tell this too because my mom, I like barely saw my mom growing up. Like she was always working. So my grandparents were the ones that raised me, and my dad um just wasn't around. He was like, yeah, long story. But yeah, it was my grandparents that raised me. So I think in a lot of ways, like sometimes your experience is almost like not experiencing it. Like by not seeing my mom many times, I'm like, oh shit, like maybe that's how I should be. But tell me about your family as well. Like where did they come from? Like tell me about that first gen experience too.
Yeah, so actually my family's from Brazil,
Oh,
and
okay.
yeah, surprise.
I love Brazil. I've been there twice and I didn't want to come back. Both times to Rio. I wanted to just like sell coconuts on the beach. That's all just like yeah.
Yeah, that's the dream. It's funny, I've actually never been to Rio, like the touristy side of, Brazil like that. But we're actually like farmers.
Oh,
My dad's side of the family is from the like northeast of Brazil, which is kind of by the Amazon. And it's like, when I'd spend my summers in Brazil, it was like no running water, taking, baths in the river, no electricity, like horses to get around. And then it's like I come back here and it's like, first world country. Like I have an
yeah.
aunt, had an aunt who passed away, and she used to call me first world baby all the time. Like that's how she like referred to me and my younger brother, because we just, we lived in the United States. So they came here, they worked really hard, they were, business owners and entrepreneurs themselves, and then they ended up, my mother and father ended up splitting when I was like 2, and then it was just me and my mom for a while. And so she had to, work even more to make sure that she could provide for us. And I knew and saw how hard she worked, and I definitely appreciated it, but I knew there was another way. Like there had to be another way where it wouldn't involve me being gone for 12 hours a day and having to drop off kids at the babysitter. And so that's why I personally like really took control of, going and getting an education. I started college, right after high school, ended up kind of taking a leave of absence for a couple of years, because I had landed what I felt was a really good job working at the hospital here. So I had great benefits. I was making, a ton of money compared to, previously I was in retail and restaurants. And now I've got, benefits and healthcare and all this stuff. But ultimately I saw that I was stuck, and I was actually in a pretty toxic environment when it came to my manager.
Mm,
And I was like, I gotta get out of here. And the only way for me to get up and out is to get an education. Like that right now is the American way. So I ended up quitting my job. Like all this happened like back to back. I ended up quitting my job, closing on my first condo, and then re-enrolling back into school full time while working at the restaurant at night. So I was like grinding for like good year and a half to finish my degree, because I knew that's how I was going to end up getting a good job. And I finally did wrap up my degree and landed my first corporate job. It was in a nonprofit organization. And then a year later, I was like, the nonprofit world, love it. They're doing great, but this ain't for me. Like this is not it. So I ended up leaving there and then actually going into my first real corporate job after that. And I've just been, year over year, it's only been a little over 4 years now, just like going up and up. And I'm like, okay, this is like, the ROI is here finally.
yeah. And we're not gonna just casually breeze by you being in school and just casually closing on your first condo. Like, I'm sorry, what? Not most college kids aren't doing that. Like, why were you even thinking about doing that?
It's so strange. I literally ask myself that all the time, because for me, what it came down to is I knew that, or what I had experienced was me and my mom, it was just the two of us, and we would move every year. I've only lived in one city, one town. It's in Connecticut, so people don't like calling it a city, but I've only lived in one place. And I ended up going to 7 different schools because we moved every year. And my mom did not have this thing about like, well, stay within your school district. So it's like, I was in one place for first grade, a different place for second grade, a different place for fourth. So I kept moving around. And while it was like fun, I guess, I didn't really like that, just always having to pick up and pack and move. So I said, all right, I want to be able to have my own home and be able to, raise my kids in one place and not move around. So that was important to me. And I don't know where I got this from, honestly, but I was like, I've always had this thing. I was like, oh, I need multiple streams of income. And so I'm going to start with this condo. And then like, I was actually married at the time. And then I was like, all right, 3 to 5 years. And then after that, we'll buy a single family home and then rent out the condo and we'll live in the single family home. And I had this idea, I don't know where I got it from, and I don't really have any like legs to it, but I was like, all right, that's the plan. And so that's what I started down the path with.
Yeah. And I'm so curious to like you moving around. Why was that? Was that just out of necessity, like trying to find another job in a certain neighborhood, like where things were happening more than the previous? I'm just curious.
You know, I think what it came down to, we were definitely working class. I'd say we were, humble beginnings is always a nice way of saying like we were poor, right? Like there were definitely times where, basic needs were met, but it was like no luxuries. Like thirsty, here's water. I don't have milk. I don't have juice. And I think that my mom being a single mom and being, an immigrant, you know, sometimes landlords would take advantage and like jack up the rent, right? And it's like, okay, like you were paying X for the past year, but your lease is over. Now you're gonna, pay even more. And it's like, all right, well, can't afford that, so let's like move someplace else. And there were also moves that were like, okay, like now we can afford something a little bit better, so let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so unfortunate. I mean, yeah, I mean, you see that all over the world just with like gentrification, for example, right? And I'm not sure if that's exactly what was happening in that neighborhood, but yeah, I mean, it's it's so
Yeah,
unfortunate.
yeah, I don't know that it was so much gentrification as much as it was just kind of taking advantage of a situation and a
Yeah,
circumstance, right? So that was something that I noticed, and just it never sat right with me. And
yeah,
so, now with me being a landlord, it's like I want to make sure that I don't, do that with my tenants, and I give them the experience that I want and would have wanted when
yeah.
I was.
That's beautiful, and that's so dope that so early in your life, it sounds like you were able to do that. And I don't know if it's like this for you, but for me at least, like I also think about multiple streams of income pretty frequently. And part of it for me is kind of like for most of my career, like I've liked jobs, but I haven't loved them. And part of it for me is building enough wealth and income on the side to be like have enough like fuck you money to be like, you know what, I don't really need this job. So like if you come at me the wrong way, like I can quit tomorrow. I'm not there yet. But like I want to be there so
But
that
yeah.
exactly. Do you think about that as well? Because I remember you talking about your first not like quote unquote corporate experience, but you had like a pretty traumatic one potentially, like it didn't go well. And is that I'm wondering, like at an early age, did you unconsciously start doing that to like start building that foundation for yourself?
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting because I always had this mindset where I'm like, well, I don't want to be a business owner. Like, I don't want to run a company. But in many ways, I was doing that. And I just didn't realize, my definition of what running a business was and what being an entrepreneur was. Because what I saw was, what my mom was doing, which was, she was running a nail salon, and my father had a used car dealership, and it's like, okay, well, you got to get up, you have clients, you have to deal with people, you've got inventory, you've got this and that and that, and it's like, oh God, like that's not what I'm about. But when I was in that position at the hospital, and I felt so powerless, and it's like you go through, all of the regular, hoops of, okay, well, let me go to HR, and let me go to HR and talk to them, and raise my concerns, and at the end of the day, unfortunately, HR for a lot of companies, it's not your best interest, it's the best interest of the company, right? Yeah. So it didn't matter how many complaints I put in, my coworkers put in, my manager was almost untouchable. And it was a situation where like I was breaking, and it took a big toll on my mental health. I like changed as a person completely during that time. I was really depressed and irritable, and it was just like awful. And I was like, I can't give anybody this power over me. So that's, like, all right, let me get an education, let me at least get a better job, and then from there, be able to move up. I think so many people are like, oh, you gotta, you do the 9 to 5, or you do like the entrepreneur route, and it's like, but you can do both.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can do both, because just like you, like, I want that fuck you money real bad, because it's like, I think there's levels to it, right? Because it's like, you get to a certain level, and then it's like, you can say fuck you to this or that, but it's like, I want to be able to say it to all of it. And I'm getting there for sure. We are getting there for sure, but it's definitely a work in progress.
Yeah, not for sure. It's definitely work in progress, and it's about getting passive income so that you don't have to do there, because like your job, you have to be there actively, right, to make the money. But like for passive income stream, like it's about making money in your sleep. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You're not making money until your money's just working for itself, right? So like I literally got into investing for the first time. Like I always knew about 401k, but really didn't understand it. And literally in 2019 was when I actually really started learning about investing and just different ways to generate passive income, right? Because it's like we're taught that you have to exchange time for money. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, I'm not trying to make that exchange anymore. Like I'm trying to get like that compound interest and just like have the money come in without me doing a thing, right? So it was great. I had at one point I was on vacation, and I had gotten like a text message from one of my tenants asking some things, and not that it was an issue, but it was like, oh, like that sucks, just got to deal with it. But then I had the thought, and I like looked over to my girl. I was like, listen, it sucks that this is happening right now, like that there, that this kind of bump in the road is happening, but I'm really glad that I'm handling this from, poolside versus, having to actually go and be there, and being able to do what I want to do from wherever is just, it's freedom, really, what it comes down to.
Yeah, exactly. That's what money represents for me, is freedom. It's not like a specific dollar amount. Like I don't want to buy anything with it, really. I just want to have the control and the option to do what I want.
Yeah.
And
the option to say no, right?
Yes.
Like, hey, I need you to, I need you to do this. No. What?
Like, I'm sorry, you just said what to me? I'm not dealing with this.
Not today.
I'm not dealing with this fuckery today. Speaking of fuckery too, going back to that, and I definitely want to get into, all that you're doing, not only finance for yourself, but also finance, like you're educating the community so much as well through a lot of your own like personal initiatives. But I definitely want to go back to that incident as well, just at the hospital. Even then, also just like how that experience then impacted some of your other roles, right? Because that wasn't your only job in quote unquote corporate America, right? Like you had so many others. But going back to that incident, is there anything specific you can share on like what happened? I'm not looking for like company name or the person's name, just more so like your experience, like things that were said to you and how you took it initially.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of microaggressions
Yeah.
and micromanagement. It was just a number of small things that, I was there for 5 years. Um,
Wow.
and at the time, I stayed so long because for me, it was like, well, this is great. Like, I'm getting, $18 an hour. Like, this is amazing. Like, how am I? And I have benefits and PTO, and, like, how can I give this up?
Yeah.
And then it just got to the point where it's like, oh, there's got to be a better way. And for me, it was, let me, finish my education, check that box off, and then get in someplace else where I'm actually going to be valued and respected. And, definitely the your manager certainly has, I think, the biggest impact on your day to day.
Mm.
And my manager was just not, somebody who really had my best interests in mind. It was really, whoever could make them look best. And since then, I've had, the privilege really to have some really amazing managers that have invested in me and that have taken the time to know and understand me as a person. Mind you, all of my managers have been white, and the majority have been white males.
Mm.
Um, and I'd say that there's a good possibility that I was the first, Latina that they had to manage. And
Why do you think that?
um, just in terms of like the location of the office, it was originally started as a startup, and just the pool and population of people that worked in the office, it was predominantly white.
Mm.
And so I think that I don't think it would have been far-fetched. They might have had somebody else, but there certainly weren't a ton of us in the office or in the organization. And just them really taking the time to understand the nuances of, me as, not just a professional, but as a person, really has made my corporate experience infinitely better.
Yeah. No, that's interesting as well too. Just like in many ways, like going into work, we see other people and we just see titles. Like we forget that they have lives outside of work, like really interesting lives too. Like if you start getting to know your coworkers, you're like, damn, I didn't know you did all that. Like you did what? Uh, but part of that also is like us sharing it or like people sharing it with us. Like how comfortable were you early on in sharing some of your experiences or just like being your most authentic self at work?
So I'd say, when I was at the hospital, it really wasn't a thought per se. It didn't kind of come through because I didn't feel like it was a quote unquote serious job. When I started working at the non-for-profit,
Yeah, yeah.
that was interesting because it is a faith-based organization. So
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah, so I'm Christian, and I was like, oh my God, yeah, let me go work for this organization, and it absolutely did amazing things for my faith and really built me up. I have really great bonds with the people there, and just grew in that area of my life exponentially. Um, but I'm a work in progress, and I know that I'm not perfect, and they're actually, like, I had a cube mate, if you would, like I shared a cube area with
Mhm.
someone, and she had actually come from a very large corporation previously, and she was very like by the book and like buttoned up, and like this is how you do things. And it's interesting, she's Dominican, and was like, well, if you're going to survive in, you know, corporate America, like you need to draw a line, and work and personal don't come in. And she's actually the first person that like told me or taught me that. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, I can see that. Like, that makes sense. So I was like, yeah, like we are not about to be, you know, Instagram friends or follow each other on social media. That's not, we're not going to do that. And I had my profile on private, and, you know, really didn't allow that. And then when I went to my new corporate job, it was a much younger demographic. Like a lot of millennials work there. It was a very sales heavy organization, which was great because, you know, now it's like literally people, I had always been like the youngest in the office. And for the first time, I was like one of the older ones in the office. And I was like, oh, okay. And there was such, it's such a amazing place to have had the opportunity to work at and to have experienced that, because so the company, it has since gotten acquired, but it was called Serious Decisions. And literally it was like two guys that started it, you know, your typical like kind of founder story. And everybody was just like family. And you know, people grew up together in that organization and really formed some amazing bonds. And I still keep in touch with so many people from that time. And like, I mean, I'm talking like weddings and baby showers. And it took me a while to warm up to being like, okay, like, you know, let me allow you into like my little sphere of
Mm-hmm.
me, because, you know, I am in an office where I'm one of a handful of, you know, minority people. And now it's, you know, like my social media is, you know, the 30 plus years before of my life. And it's like, you know, a little ratchet, a little hood, a little polished, a little, you know, I'm multifaceted, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that goes back to what I mean. Like, you know, being authentic is knowing that like you can do both, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, I can go, and I know you've talked about this before, but like on the weekend we can turn up and, you know, we can listen to reggaeton and grind, and, you know, I could twerk for days. Do you, you know, have the honor and the privilege of experiencing that side of my life,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is, you know, what I've been evolving and learning. And as I've gotten more comfortable in my own skin, and again, trusting myself in the decisions that I'm making for, you know, me as a, you know, single woman who's doing, you know, real estate and corporate and philanthropy and all these things, it's like, okay, well, what am I going to allow you to experience with me? And it's gotten to the point now where it's like, well, I just want you to know that like you don't have to choose, like,
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole idea behind Plural. It's like, it's just plural with a W, you know what I mean? And the whole idea is that you can be raw, you can be yourself. Like, you don't have to be singular, right? You don't have to choose between the two. Like, I've always struggled with the word and. I talk about this in therapy all the time because for me, it's very binary, or it used to be at least. Like, it's either I do this or I do that. And my therapist was like, why are you using the word or? And I was like, I don't know. It was just so ingrained that I had to do that. I mean, going back to like social media, I remember being in college and they would tell me, remember to make your social media private. Remember, like they would tell me even to like change my maybe my friends told me that. I remember in college, like I changed my name so I wasn't like searchable. Like, I mean,
I
there were so many things where like I felt like I was trained to believe that you shouldn't even share your social media. My mom would tell me that all the time. It was like, don't do this and that. And then, yeah, I realized like that's not the way, but you were going to say something. Sorry.
no, it's fine. Same actually. And it was not even so much, and certainly there was a part of it of like, okay, well, you know, if you go get a job, they're immediately going to Google you and scour
Yeah.
social media to see like what you've got.
Yeah.
but it's also like a privacy thing, right? Like the internet is a weird place, and like,
Sure.
as a woman, it's like, listen, like, don't be creepy, like, just leave me alone. And there was a while that I definitely did a little bit of a cleanse, if you would. And same thing, I changed my social media to, like, you cannot find me. Like, you had to like really be looking and know what you were looking for. Like, my handle was a Latin phrase, right? Like, people are like, what does this even mean? And I was like, oh, it's just a little something that I like. But I did it intentionally because I didn't want to be found.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really profound, because I was busy finding myself.
Oh.
So, after, my ex and I split, I went into this space where it's like, okay, well, who is Samara? Like, what am I about? And I went through this whole like self-discovery and really figuring out me. And it's like, well, I don't want anybody's, thoughts or opinions to kind of influence what I'm, processing, going through. So, um, I definitely like kept it very like, all right, well, social media, like, let's just keep it for close friends and, private, lock it all up. Um, but now I really feel I have to live out what I've always said, which is representation matters.
Yeah.
And I've always been searching for representation, and I've always been the one to like say it. And then my therapist actually was like, well, why can't that be you? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, why can't you be the representation you're looking for? And I was like, because I'm looking for it. Like, what do you mean, me? And so I was like, all right, like, people need to be able to see different options for their life beyond what they were just shown. I never thought of sales as a career. For me, sales was like, car dealership people, or like
Yeah. Yeah.
Mary Kay. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to like go door to door selling, makeup. And now I'm like, wait, B2B sales, like talking to these, Fortune 500 companies and executives, I didn't even think that was an option. And it took people to, some time actually to convince me. Um, it was probably like a year and a half before I was like, all right, let me get into quota bearing and see what I can do there. And I've been successful, but I never would have seen that as an option. So I feel like I'm a bridge sometimes between, the people that I grew up with and, the small town that I came from, and like this big world with all these other options and opportunities. So I just want to show people what's possible.
I love that. And I'm wondering, like, was there anything else that you felt like you needed at the time? Because you said, like, in many ways, your therapist told you, I think you wanna, like, why don't you be who you needed, right? Or why don't you be who you need? Like, who did you need besides seeing someone in sales potentially?
I mean, I think that was it. Like, at the time, I really didn't see a lot of successful, you know, Latina, Hispanic women of color, really in general, in positions of power. And so that was always a hunger and ambition of mine, but I didn't know how to get there, because it's like, well, everybody in power is white, and usually a white male. So like, the tools and access and resources that they had are very different than what I had. So it didn't seem really to make a lot of sense for me to go along that same path, because I didn't have the same tools to get there. So I was looking for someone who had the same tools, aka the same background as I did, and how they overcame like challenges and obstacles, in order to get to where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. It's sort of like building your own path, because the path that you want to follow doesn't even look like anything. It doesn't look like you at all.
Yeah. And then it's also like, well, what is that path, right?
Yeah.
It was so singular. The image, like I said, we had parents that were working very hard, um, but then what are the other options?
Yeah.
And they can, there's this wonderful saying that my godmother told me, which was, you can't expect apples from a pear tree. And I was looking for apples, and my mom could only give me pears. And it was like, all right, well, I need to figure out how to get this other life that I have seen, folks acquire, and like that's what I want to do. How do I get there for myself?
It's so interesting too, like going back to that earlier experience when, you were speaking to your Dominican friend and she was like, this is how you should do it. Keep this line separated. And later you go through this self-discovery and then figure out like, this is who I want to be. This is who I want to present to the world. This is what I want people to know me as. But then one thing is discovering that, and another thing is like putting it to practice, right? And what was that like? You go into, I don't know, back to your job and you're just like, I'm going to present this part of me now. Like, what was that like? Were you nervous, anxious? Was it strange? Just like, what was that experience of like you being yourself, this new self that you discovered as well?
Yeah, I think it was baby steps, right? I don't think it was like this one, magical like light bulb moment. But it was, starting with, just close friends, and,
Mm,
sharing a little bit, in person, um, and just like little things, I didn't try and do it all at once, right? It wasn't just one day where I'm like, hey, like, here I am sort of thing. It was like, as I get more and more comfortable with things, this is what I'm going to, do and share. So um, it's progress. It's, again, like, not overwhelming myself with feeling like I have to bare my soul um, to the entire world, because at the end, I do think that privacy is valuable, and
yeah.
a lot of times with social media we lose that, and there is this pressure to like share everything, and it's usually the highlights and the best of
Mhm.
the best that people are putting on.
Yeah.
So like, I do it in small ways that people probably don't even realize or pay attention to, but like, like on my stories, like I try not to use filters, right?
Mm.
Because like, as a woman, it's, you gotta put on makeup, you gotta have your face beat, blah blah blah. Number one, I don't know how to do makeup, so like, that's just not me. You're gonna get some like tinted chapstick and a little bit of like blusher, bronzer, eyeliner, and that's about it. But trying even that, like literally visually, like, all right, like this is me barefaced, no filter. Here are some learnings. I try to share, things that frustrate me, because everybody posts like, hashtag goals, but there's definitely things along the way that are challenging and frustrating. And so um, I had done a speech once, actually, and I said this line, and it was just like full circle moment, because now, just a couple months ago, Kamala said the same line when she was inaugurated, which is, um, I may be the first, but I won't be the last. And
Mm.
so that's really just what I'm trying to do and show, and just little by little, like, here are little bits and pieces of me and my life that may or may not be, relevant for you.
Yeah. And yeah, I love that as well. I mean, we can say that you gave Kamala that line pretty much, right?
I'm pretty sure, right? I should like look into the sort of copyright stuff that I have going on.
Yeah. Add that as another income stream.
Yes, absolutely. Residual income, please. Give me the
Uh,
royalties.
yeah. I'm so interested too because I'm in sales as well, and like people typically have the 9 to 5, right? And like within the 9 to 5, you do whatever you do with your coworkers. You share certain things, share not. Um, but then having clients is a whole nother game.
Mm.
Like I have clients that add me on social media, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is weird. Like, do I make a close friends group? I feel like that's even more pressure because
Yeah.
that's how you're gold on your job. Like your coworkers, a lot of them, they don't have that much impact on like if you're gonna do well at work or not. But I'm just like, oh my god. Like I randomly I put up like a Cardi B gif. I'm like, are they gonna like say like they don't want to work with me because I'm ratchet? I don't know. Like, do you think about that stuff?
That's fair and like very valid. And I think, ugh, so like I'm on LinkedIn, right? So it's like, hey, clients, like you go talk to me over here. And then I had like a Twitter that I created for my job, and it was like, yeah, like follow there, but like
uh,
I don't know, like I haven't gotten to the point yet of clients following me. I don't have a Facebook right now, so I haven't had one for years actually. So like they can't find me there, but then like Instagram, nobody's found me there yet. But also traditionally, I have
yeah.
been new business, so it wasn't the
Mm,
same like account management. I
yeah.
came in, sold you, and then let the delivery team figure it out after that, right? So
Yeah.
I was just a hunter and passed it off. So I didn't create as many relationships with my clients, and the ones that I did from previous roles, like yeah, we're on LinkedIn. Like you can follow me there, no problem, all the time. It's so interesting. Literally yesterday, I'm back now on the account management side. So I'm, building those relationships and I'm working with folks day to day. And I had a phone call with a client who we have like a laundry list of open items that we need to get through and projects and flights and scoping calls. And this person is managing for like all these different stakeholders. And I'm like, let me get some of this off your plate. Who else can I work with? And they weren't being responsive. I was like, what's going on? Like, we need to do this. Like, this is my pipeline. Like, what are we doing? And I had a conversation with my client, and they go, hey, I'm really sorry. I know I've been hard to track down, full transparency. I'm just not doing well. And I think pandemic fatigue has finally hit. And so I've gone to the doctor, and I think I'm going to take some time off. And I, know that we have a lot of things in flight. So we'll, circle back and, close up on different things. But this is what's going on. And I was like, oh my God, like, thank you for trusting me
Yeah.
to be able to like share that. And this is like a pretty powerful person within the organization. And I'm like, I feel like little old me, like, oh, wait, just the sales rep here, no big deal. So it'll be interesting to see how this year evolves, and what types of relationships come up from it. I think that the pandemic and working from home has really shattered a lot of
Yeah.
the status quo, quite honestly, and these thoughts and ideas of work-life balance.
Hmm.
I don't think that exists. I don't think it existed previously. I think there was a facade of it existing. And I truly feel like even the, C-level executives would not necessarily be their authentic selves, right? Because they also had to run a company. They have to put on,
Yeah.
I've got to report to the board and to shareholders and this and that. And
Yeah.
so I can understand there's a level there of authenticity that they're struggling with as well.
Yeah.
I think now, I have meetings with my SVP, and she'll be like, one moment, puts me on, mute, and is talking to her kids, checking homework, like the dog. I mean, you've seen my dog over here a bunch of times. And so I think that really has changed how this corporate and personal fine line has, blurred, really.
Yeah. I mean, even as sellers, I think like we're trained in many ways to go in there with a certain type of energy. You know what I mean? Like we're supposed to be the best meeting of their day. You know what I mean? And like no best meeting starts off with, oh man, things just aren't going well, but that's really how we feel sometimes. But I feel like a lot of times we have to be like, hey, top of the morning, how's it going? You know what I mean? But like that's not real, you know what I mean? So
Oh,
maybe we got to do like a follow-up episode with you on like how's it been going now?
yeah. Well, we'll have to do a part two in a few months to see how things have progressed. But for sure, it's just, 2020, we shifted to like lead with empathy, right?
Yeah.
Business is prospecting. Like, how am I going to call you, right, when
Yeah.
the whole world is shut down, and be like, hi, we haven't met previously, but I was just,
Yeah.
working with your peers in marketing. Like, what? Like, this is not, I'm trying to get a 6-year-old on a Zoom call right now. So
It's so
it's
weird. Like, shouldn't we always have led with empathy? It's so
right.
weird.
Yeah. And I think we've course corrected. I think, um, this whole quote unquote new normal that we have been talking about
Yeah.
really has opened up to allow us to have relationships, as sellers on a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We'll see if any of my clients start following me. If you do, what up?
What up? Last question, because I'm sure you got things to do. There's so many things that we didn't get to talk about. Like, you being Brazilian, didn't talk about that at all.
Yeah.
So like family dynamics, so many things. Anyway, as we wrap up, like, what's one thing that continues to inspire and empower you to be your most authentic self?
I would say that, like I mentioned before, it's, sort of being the light, if you would, for other folks, and showing people that there are other options in terms of what you can do and be with your life, and the things that you can accomplish. And just because, it's hard to be what you can't see. So I'm literally just trying to act as that, reflection of, you know, all of these things that you can do or not do, and try and know that literally the sky's the limit. If I did it, there's literally no reason why you can't do it, because we're no different. I'm no more special than you, and so that's just my hope, to just inspire, really.